Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles. The gavel slammed down, the sound echoing in the courtroom like the final nail in my coffin. All marital assets shall be awarded to the petitioner, Mrs. Evelyn Carter, in light of the defendant's behavior during these proceedings. Mr. Carter is ordered to relinquish all jointly owned properties, vehicles, and financial assets to his wife immediately. Silence, not just in the courtroom but in my head. A roaring kind of silence, the kind that comes when your entire life is ripped away in a single sentence. I barely heard the judge's follow-up comments, something about my lack of cooperation and hostile attitude toward the proceedings. My lawyer, a man I had trusted, sat beside me, staring straight ahead, his mouth clamped shut. Betrayal. That was the only word swirling in my head. Not just by Evelyn, my wife of 11 years, the woman I once thought was my partner in life, but by the system. The system that, despite every ounce of proof I had of her infidelity, had sided with her. I wasn't a fool. I knew courts often leaned in favor of the woman in a divorce. But this was outright theft, a daylight robbery wrapped in a legal bow. Evelyn sat across from me, her lips curled into a smirk she barely bothered to hide. The smirk of someone who had already moved on. Someone who knew she had won before the game even started. And I had made the mistake of thinking this was a fair fight. 2 months earlier. I should have seen the warning signs sooner. I should have trusted my gut when she started coming home late. Her excuses always polished, rehearsed. Work was demanding. The new project had tight deadlines. Late-night meetings were unavoidable. Lies. I ignored them at first. I had been working long hours myself, running my own construction business. Late nights, early mornings, trying to build something worthwhile for both of us. I never imagined she would take everything I built and hand it over to another man. The first real gut punch came when I found the hotel receipt. It wasn't hidden, not tucked away or buried under old papers. No, it was on the kitchen counter, right next to the coffee machine, almost like she wanted me to find it. The Hilton Grand. One night, a suite, paid in full, under his name, Gregory Lancaster. I knew the name. Everyone in town did. High-profile lawyer, charismatic, wealthy, a smug, arrogant predator who prided himself on his courtroom victories and his conquests, both professional and personal. And now, apparently, my wife. I stared at the receipt for what felt like an eternity, my brain refusing to believe what my eyes were telling me. I looked up and there she was, Evelyn, standing in the doorway, dressed in her usual pristine blouse and pencil skirt, sipping coffee from her favorite mug like it was just another morning. She didn't flinch when she saw me holding the receipt, didn't look guilty, didn't look ashamed. Instead, she smiled. Guess we should talk, huh? The talk that changed everything. I don't remember sitting down, but somehow, I was at the kitchen table, my hands clenched into fists. She sat across from me, crossing her legs like we were negotiating a business deal. Greg and I have been seeing each other for about 6 months, she said. Her tone as casual as if she were discussing the weather. I wanted to tell you sooner, but I knew you'd react like this. I forced myself to stay silent, even as my chest burned with rage. You've been so busy with work, she continued, swirling her coffee absent-mindedly. We've grown apart. It just happened. It just happened. Cut the crap, Evelyn, I snapped. You don't just fall into a hotel bed with a man like Lancaster. You chose this. She sighed, setting her mug down with an annoying clink. I'm not here to argue, Daniel. I just want to make this easy. We both move on. No hard feelings. No hard feelings? I opened my mouth to lash out, but then she did something that made my blood freeze. She slid a manila folder across the table. Sign this, she said. I stared at the folder like it was a venomous snake. Divorce papers, she added when I didn't move. And then the kicker. Greg prepared them for us. The arrogance. The sheer audacity. She was leaving me for a high-powered lawyer and had the nerve to have him draft our divorce papers? I pushed the folder back without opening it. No, she blinked. Daniel. I said no. Her lips pressed together in annoyance, but she quickly masked it with a small, condescending smile. "You don't really have a choice," she said sweetly. "We both know how these things go. I've already retained Greg as my attorney, and with the way our assets are structured, I'll be entitled to." I stood so abruptly that my chair scraped against the floor, the sound slicing through her words. I leaned down, meeting her gaze. "I will never agree to this," I said, my voice low, controlled, dangerous. And for the first time in the conversation, her confidence wavered. Only for a second. Then she smiled again, that smirk. "We'll see," she murmured. Present day, the courtroom aftermath. I walked out of that courtroom with nothing. No house, no business, no money. Evelyn had won. On paper, she thought this was over, that she had crushed me beneath the weight of a corrupt system and a man who thought he was untouchable. She had no idea who she was dealing with, because I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. She wanted to take everything from me? Fine. But I would make sure she choked on her victory. Because when I strike back, when I turn the tables, Evelyn and Greg Lancaster won't just lose. They'll fall. And I'll be the one standing over the wreckage, watching them burn. The courthouse smelled of old paper and stale coffee. Two things I used to associate with routine paperwork and mundane legal matters. Not anymore. Now it smelled like defeat. Except I wasn't defeated. Not yet. I stood outside the courtroom, my fists clenched at my sides as I stared at the doors that had just slammed shut behind me. Inside, my ex-wife, or soon-to-be ex-wife, since the ink hadn't dried yet, was basking in the glow of her victory. She thought she had won. That thought alone was enough to make my rage simmer just below the surface. I had gone into that courtroom prepared. I had evidence. Hard proof of Evelyn's affair. Bank records. Credit card transactions showing luxury hotel stays. Text message exchanges I had obtained through legal discovery. Messages that showed her and Greg Lancaster conspiring together long before she had the guts to serve me with papers. And yet none of it mattered. Because Greg Lancaster was not just a lawyer. He was a master manipulator. And today, in court, I saw just how deep his influence ran. The courtroom battle. The courtroom was packed, mostly with her people. Evelyn had come prepared. Her side of the gallery filled with friends, colleagues, and a few character witnesses who had been handpicked to make her look like the wounded, mistreated wife. I had my lawyer, Arthur, sitting beside me. A good man, but clearly outgunned. Greg sat at the opposite table, smug as ever, flashing his perfectly curated lawyer smile, the kind that made juries swoon and judges nod along. I should have known from the moment he stood up that I was about to be blindsided. "Your Honor," he began, "we have serious concerns about Mr. Carter's fitness to retain any portion of the marital estate." My fists tightened. What the hell was he talking about? Evelyn played the part of the fragile, trembling wife perfectly, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "We regret that it has come to this," Greg continued, pacing the floor like he was delivering the closing argument of a murder trial. "But we must bring to light a pattern of behavior that has left my client, a dedicated, faithful wife, in fear for her well-being." I nearly laughed, except it wasn't funny. Not when he pulled out his own folder, a stack of documents thick enough to crush a man's spirit. "Exhibit A," he said smoothly, handing the judge a collection of printed emails. I leaned toward my lawyer. "What the hell is that?" I hissed. Arthur skimmed the pages and his face paled. I knew right then that I had been set up. Hard. Greg turned toward the judge. "These emails, obtained through legal discovery, reveal a troubling pattern of behavior from Mr. Carter. In these messages, he repeatedly threatens my client, uses abusive language, and, most concerningly, implies that he would rather destroy everything than allow her to leave the marriage peacefully." "What?" My voice boomed through the courtroom. The judge shot me a glare. "Mr. Carter, you will remain silent unless spoken to." I bit my tongue hard. I turned to Arthur, who was flipping through the pages frantically. "I never wrote those," I growled under my breath. Arthur gave me a grim look. "They're coming from your email." My email. Greg Lancaster had fabricated evidence, and I had walked right into his trap. Greg continued, layering lie after carefully constructed lie. "Exhibit B. A falsified statement from one of Evelyn's friends claiming I had a violent temper. Exhibit C. Photos of our house with minor damages. Scratched furniture, a broken picture frame, that they were spinning into some twisted narrative of an aggressive husband. Exhibit D. A restraining order request that had been conveniently drafted days before the hearing, just waiting for the judge's signature. The narrative they had built was perfect. I was an unstable, dangerous man, a man incapable of controlling his emotions, a man who, in the eyes of the court, had no business retaining a single penny of what he had built. When the judge spoke the words, it was almost surreal. I find in favor of the petitioner, Mrs. Carter shall retain sole ownership of the marital estate, including all financial assets, real estate, and vehicles. Additionally, due to the aggressive nature of the respondent, I am approving a temporary restraining order. Mr. Carter, you are to vacate the marital home immediately. I didn't hear the rest. It was over. They had won. I walked out of that courtroom with nothing but the clothes on my back. Evelyn didn't even try to hide her satisfaction. As I passed her in the hallway, she leaned in, her voice a whisper laced with mockery. I told you we'd see, she said. And then, like the devil himself, Greg Lancaster winked at me. They thought it was over, that I was going to slink away, broken and defeated. They were wrong. I had no money, no home, no assets, but I still had one thing they didn't plan. Greg Lancaster thought he was untouchable, that he could forge evidence, manipulate the courts, and get away with it. But no one is truly untouchable. And Evelyn? She thought she had taken everything from me. But she forgot one important thing. When you take everything from a man, you leave him with nothing to lose. And a man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous man of all. I had lost everything. My house, my savings, my business, my dignity. But I wasn't done. A man with nothing to lose is a man who is willing to do whatever it takes. And I was done playing fair. Evelyn and Greg Lancaster had stacked the deck against me, but they had made one fatal mistake. They thought I was out of the game. I wasn't. I was just getting started. 1 week after the courtroom betrayal. The first few days after the ruling were brutal. I didn't have a place to stay, so I crashed at my friend Dean's place. A former Marine and a guy who had my back since we were kids. You really got screwed, man, Dean muttered, handing me a beer as we sat on his back porch. I took a long sip, the bitterness of the drink matching the bitterness in my gut. Yeah, but I'm not gonna sit here and whine about it. Dean smirked. Good, 'cause I was about 5 minutes away from smacking you upside the head if you did. I huffed a laugh. Dean never was one for pity parties. So what's the plan? He asked, kicking his feet up on the railing. That was the question, wasn't it? I had spent the last few nights thinking, analyzing every possible move, every angle I could take. Greg Lancaster had played dirty. He had rigged the courtroom against me with falsified evidence, fake witnesses, and a corrupt network that let him get away with it. But every predator has a weakness, and I was about to find his. I needed information, real dirt. If Greg Lancaster had gone to the lengths of forging evidence to ruin me, then there had to be other skeletons in his closet. So I started where every scumbag lawyer likes to hide his secrets, money. Lancaster's law firm, Harrison and Lancaster LLP, was prestigious, but even the richest sharks have cracks in their armor. I spent the next few days tracking down former clients, disgruntled ex-employees, anyone who had even the slightest grudge against Greg. And I found something, or rather someone, Melissa Warren. She used to work at Lancaster's firm as a paralegal before she was fired under mysterious circumstances. I managed to find her on LinkedIn and sent her a message. She didn't reply, so I showed up where she worked now, a small coffee shop on the edge of town. She recognized me the moment I walked in. Her eyes went wide, and she started to back away. I held up my hands. I'm not here to cause trouble, I said. She hesitated, glancing around like she was expecting Greg himself to burst through the doors. I just want to talk, I said. About Lancaster. Her lips pressed together. I don't talk about him. Because he paid you off? Her eyes flickered. Bullseye. I pulled out a chair and sat down. I know what he did to you, Melissa. And I know you hate him for it. You don't have to tell me everything. Just tell me one thing. Was it dirty money? A long silence stretched between us. Then, finally, she whispered, "You have no idea how dirty." Melissa didn't give me much, but she gave me enough. Greg Lancaster wasn't just fabricating evidence. He was laundering money through fake legal settlements. Turns out, Lancaster had been running a side hustle for years, setting up fake personal injury lawsuits, where the plaintiffs were actually shell companies he controlled. The settlements looked real on paper, but the money? It went straight into his pockets. That was fraud. And fraud? Fraud could take down even the most untouchable lawyer. I couldn't take Greg down alone. I needed someone with the right connections. And I knew exactly who to call. Christine Lancaster. Yes, Greg's wife. I had done some digging into her as well, and let's just say their marriage wasn't as solid as it looked. Greg might have been a powerhouse in court, but at home, he was a serial cheater. And Christine? She knew. She had stayed with him because of the money, the lifestyle, the reputation. But she wasn't happy. So I sent her an anonymous email. A simple message. I have proof that Greg is committing fraud. If you're interested in taking everything from him before he takes everything from you, let's talk. I didn't expect a response. But the next day I got a reply. 4 words. Where and when? Christine was a sharp woman. Smarter than I gave her credit for. We met at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. She wore sunglasses and a scarf, clearly trying to keep a low profile. She sat across from me and got straight to the point. You said you have proof, she said, her voice cool and controlled. I slid a USB drive across the table. That's everything, I said. Fake settlements, wire transfers, off-the-record bank accounts, all linked to Greg. She took the drive but didn't look at it. Instead, she studied me. What's in this for you? She asked. I leaned back. Ruining him, I said simply. She smirked. I like you. I shrugged. You gonna help me or not? Christine tapped her fingers on the table, thinking. Then, she pulled out a card and slid it to me. It was a direct number to an IRS fraud investigator. My cousin, she said. Give him the right evidence, and Greg will have bigger problems than just a divorce. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Now, the real game was beginning. Greg Lancaster built his life on control. He manipulated the legal system, twisted the truth, and bought his way out of trouble. Evelyn thought she had won, thought she had played me like a fool. They had no idea what was coming. Because now, I was done playing fair. The first domino falls. I made the call to Christine's cousin at the IRS fraud division the very next day. I kept it simple. I have documented proof that Gregory Lancaster is committing financial fraud through his law firm. That was all it took. Once the IRS caught a whiff of dirty money, they dug deep. Christine made sure of it. Within a week, Greg was under federal investigation. The best part? He didn't even know it yet. Destroying his reputation. Greg Lancaster loved his image. The powerful, charismatic attorney. The courtroom shark. The man with influence. So I took that from him. Using the information Melissa Warren, his former paralegal, had given me, I leaked 2 key stories to a local investigative journalist. Lancaster's fake settlements and fraud investigation. His history of cheating, complete with detailed accounts from former lovers. The first was enough to ruin his career. The second? That was for Christine. By the time the article hit the news, Lancaster's clients were fleeing. His law firm partners were distancing themselves, and his reputation was shredded beyond repair. And Evelyn? Well, she had no idea how bad it was going to get. The ultimate betrayal. Greg had promised Evelyn everything. Money, power, status. She thought she had upgraded when she left me. Thought she had secured her future by attaching herself to Greg. She bet on the wrong man. When the IRS came knocking, they froze his accounts. All of them. No liquid cash. No hidden reserves. Nothing. Evelyn woke up one morning to find out that the car she was driving, seized. The mansion she was living in, under investigation. The financial security Greg had promised? Vanished. And Greg himself? Furious. He had no idea how his secret got out. And the best part? He started suspecting Evelyn. The meltdown. Christine, being the genius that she is, played her part perfectly. She filed for divorce immediately, and she froze Greg's assets before he could hide them. Then she blamed Evelyn. You think it's a coincidence that this all happened after you got involved with her? She's the only new piece in your life, Greg. And Greg? He believed her. The moment Evelyn lost Greg's trust, she lost everything. By the time she tried to call me, she was desperate. Her voicemail? Pathetic. Daniel, I need to talk to you. Please. I didn't know this would happen. I didn't mean for any of this. Just call me back. Okay? I deleted it. The final blow. I wasn't done yet. I wanted Evelyn to suffer the way she had made me suffer. She took everything from me, so I made sure she had nothing left. I made a call to an old friend, a real estate broker who specialized in distressed properties. Lancaster's mansion was going on the market. And guess who made an anonymous offer? Me. For pennies on the dollar. Within a month, Evelyn was kicked out of the home she thought she had won. She tried to fight it. She tried to beg. She even showed up at my door. Disheveled. Worn down. No more arrogance. No more smug smiles. Just defeat. Daniel, please. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, looking at the wreckage of the woman who had once destroyed me. I tilted my head. Please what? Her eyes filled with tears. I have nowhere to go. I let a slow smile creep across my face. Good. Then I shut the door in her face. I had won. Not just in the legal sense. Not just in the financial sense. I had destroyed them. Greg Lancaster was finished. His reputation, his career, his finances, all gone. Evelyn was a broken shell of herself, standing outside my house, pleading for a second chance after throwing me away like garbage. And me? I was exactly where I wanted to be. Greg's last humiliation. The IRS investigation wasn't just about money laundering anymore. Once Christine's cousin handed over the evidence to the district attorney, Greg's charges multiplied. Fraud? Check. Tax evasion? Check. Obstruction of justice? Oh, that was a big check. The media ate it up. The once invincible Greg Lancaster, the man who laughed in my face in the courtroom, was now doing everything he could to keep himself out of prison. And it got even better. His law firm fired him the second the scandal became public. His partners, the same people who had once backed him without question, turned on him faster than vultures on a fresh corpse. He had nowhere to run. No job. No income. No friends. And no more Evelyn. Because the second she realized he was a sinking ship, she jumped overboard. Evelyn's final downfall. The day I slammed the door in Evelyn's face, I thought that was the last time I'd hear from her. I was wrong. A few days later, I got a text. Evelyn, Daniel, please. I just want to talk. I ignored it. Then another. Evelyn, I made a mistake. Please, I just need a chance to explain. Explain? Explain what? That she threw away a decade of marriage because she thought she was upgrading to a wealthy, powerful man? That she had no problem taking everything from me when she thought Greg was going to keep her in luxury? Now that he was broke and disgraced, she suddenly remembered I existed? I left her on read. A week later, I saw her outside my new house. The same house Greg had once owned. The house I had bought for pennies when the bank seized his assets. She looked wrecked. Hair unkempt, dark circles under her eyes, wearing the same designer clothes she had once flaunted. Except now, they looked out of place. She wasn't rich anymore. She wasn't comfortable anymore. She was desperate. I let her stand there for a while, watching her shift on her feet, waiting for me to take pity on her. Then I walked outside. She lit up, as if she thought I was finally going to save her. Daniel, she whispered. I folded my arms, staring her down. Why are you here? She licked her lips nervously. I need help. I raised an eyebrow. You have Greg for that. Her face crumpled. Greg's ruined. I smiled. I know, she sighed, shaking her head. I don't have anywhere to go, Daniel. I cut her off. You mean you don't have anywhere nice to go? Because I'm sure you can find a cheap motel or a shelter. But that's not what you want, is it? Her face burned with humiliation, but she didn't deny it. I let out a mocking laugh. This is rich. You threw me away for a better life. And now, when it's gone, you come crawling back to me. Tears welled in her eyes. Daniel, please. No, no more begging. No more manipulation. I stepped closer, my voice like steel. Evelyn, you lost the right to ask me for anything the moment you stood in that courtroom and watched them take everything from me without a second thought. She shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know. I cut her off again. You didn't care. That hit her like a slap. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I let that sink in for a moment before I gave her my final words. You want help, I said. Go find another fool. Because I'm not the man you used to know. Then I turned my back on her. And this time I didn't look back. Securing my future. Greg was ruined. Evelyn was homeless. And me? I was reborn. I rebuilt my business, this time smarter, stronger. I made damn sure that no one could ever take it from me again. Christine, Greg's ex-wife, made out like a bandit in the divorce settlement. She got half of his remaining assets, while the IRS drained the rest. She sent me a bottle of expensive whiskey as a thank you. I sent her a note back. Next round's on me. As for me, I moved on. New home, new life, new purpose. And every once in a while, when I read the news about Greg fighting legal battles from a rundown apartment, or when I heard through the grapevine that Evelyn was working a retail job just to survive, I allowed myself a satisfied smirk. They had tried to bury me. They forgot one thing. I wasn't the kind of man you could keep down. I was the kind of man who came back stronger. And this time, no one would take what was mine again. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.